Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. This is the Self-Control Show, and I'm your host, Jason Schnitzer. Here's your next episode. All right, coming in hot today. I'm gonna talk about a subject that, more or less comes up in almost every one of my sessions with clients, and that is how to change a behavior. And in most cases, the behaviors that people are trying to change is they label them as bad. Okay, so first off, I kind of want to address the idea of what bad behavior is or bad choices, or in this case, it would be a coping response to a situation in your life. And this is just kind of the framework I want you to work off of. Instead of seeing things as like a bad behavior, start viewing them as an adaptive response to a situation. It's a learned response to a given situation. And when you start seeing it as an adaptive response versus a bad choice or a bad behavior or a bad coping mechanism, let's say, it takes the shame out of that potential experience. And a lot of what is breaking old molds has to do with like melting away the shame around it. Because when you feel shame around something, it's harder to ask for help. There's a lot of negative emotions that are attached to that specific instance. And it just makes pattern breaking more difficult. Okay, so first off, whenever you're trying to change a behavior, I like to start off, and I wish I would have known this 10 years ago. I just did a post on this actually. The one thing I wish I would have known 10 years ago about changing a behavior is, what is it about this specific action that you're doing? What is it keeping you safe from? What is it protecting you from? And that is step one. And a good example of this, it's like, what is the procrastination keeping me safe from or protecting me? What is the perfectionism keeping me safe from? What is the substance abuse keeping me safe from? What is not starting that workout routine keeping me safe from? And I think if you sit with that question long enough and you're able to be honest with yourself and notice the thoughts that you're having around it, there's a lot of wisdom to be had in there. Like, for example, procrastination is a perfect one. What is procrastination keeping you safe from? Well, it could be a number of things, but like, for example, I procrastinate in a lot of different ways, but my awareness is much better to it now. But like, a lot of times I'll get this feeling of procrastination, even when it comes to like shooting video. And I know that there's a part of me that is, afraid or nervous or intimidated by the idea of putting myself out there. So what's keeping me safe and what that procrastination is keeping me safe from is potentially the fear of, what other people might think, of failure, all those things. So there's kind of like a pyramid that you can walk yourselves through. So you take your behavior, your thoughts and stories around that behavior. What are the emotions attached to that behavior? And then underneath that, what are your beliefs and the context about the behavior? And then a lot of times you can walk the feelings around this specific behavior back to somewhat of an original incident of where your whole belief structure around whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish started. And so start thinking about like, okay, we can use my example of procrastination. Okay, I want to change the relationship that I have, or improve the relationship I have with procrastination, specifically procrastination around shooting a video, let's just say, for example. So the behavior is procrastination. The thoughts and stories around that are, okay, what are people going to think about it? Are people going to like it? The fear of those things. And, emotions underneath the thoughts and stories are fear, are uncertainty, are anxiousness. And then the belief that I have around shooting videos is like, oh gosh, people are going to say negative things about it. And if I get in touch with that feeling and I figure out for myself, like, man, how old does this feeling feel like I am? It's like, it almost takes me back to like my teenage years, doing things that were newer to me, and, I didn't get support, and, people making fun of me. And it's interesting because when you are able to kind of like walk yourself through this and you understand that a lot of our experiences when we're younger impact us even to this day. And the reason is because most of our brains and our nervous system isn't fully functional when we go through a lot of difficult things in life. Not only that, but not very many of us had very good caretakers or parents that were able to attune to us and help us through these difficult things. So we're left to deal with things on our own based off all the knowledge that we have at the time, which usually isn't very much. So if you put this in a matter of like lifting weights, it would be like if I asked you to hold a weight that was just too heavy for you to hold and you got injured. That a lot of times happens to us from an emotional standpoint when we're younger. And again, we carry that with us. And like, for example, it wasn't until I was able to do this for myself and actually confront what's underneath it to realize like, oh man, that's so funny that the teenage version of myself shows up every time before I'm about to get on in front of a camera. And it's like, wow. Having the realization that part of my business is being run by a teenage version of myself is like, first of all, that it was like a huge aha. And also a very pivotal point in where like I felt like, oh wow, so I've been letting the teenage version of myself run this part of my business because there's a part of me that's afraid of what other people will think. It's like, but I know as 36-year-old me that lots of people have given me great feedback on what I have to say, especially with regards to self-control and stepping into masculinity. And it's had such positive impacts on their life and, literally helped people 180 their life around after just a few sessions. So it's like, how could I possibly feel this way? Well, the thing is that like the teenage version of myself, because it developed these, beliefs, emotion, thoughts, and therefore behaviors based off of experiences that we had in the past, is like, what happens when you hold a weight that's too much for you to handle when you're younger is that part of you kind of like fractures off. Okay. And it stays stuck in the past. So it's like, people talk about baggage. They talk about like all the things when they're talking about your past. Oh, just leave the past behind you. You can't do that. Okay. You can't just, well, you can try to do that. It's called bypassing and that works for a certain amount of time. But the thing is like your past always catches back up to you. And it's a really heavy burden to carry around, to kind of having to shove away emotions and feelings time after time. So when you're actually able to confront this and you're able to bring that past forward into today, and you can start analyzing, it's okay, what were my old coping behaviors around procrastination? It's like, okay, I get busy doing all the other things and not do the thing. What was the story that I told myself when I was in that state? And again, the story was like, oh man, what are people going to think? People aren't even going to like this, et cetera, et cetera. What are those old emotions? A lot of times there's fear, stress, anxiousness. And then what is the belief underneath that? And that goes along with the story of like, hey, like I'm not good enough to do this sort of thing. And again, original incident would be doing things that I wasn't very good at and having that not received well, getting made fun of. Well, you can flip that now that you walk yourself back through it and you can decide, okay, what are my new resilient behaviors going to be around making a change. So when I get that feeling that comes up that's all too familiar to me of around procrastination when it comes to shooting videos, I can sit there with myself and just give myself what it needs, what I needed at that time for me to feel good about putting things out there. Like, for example, if you had somebody rooting you on and cheering for you, even when you were bad at something, knowing that all that it takes to be good is to be bad enough times to where you get practice enough to be good, then maybe you wouldn't likely have these issues. So I can be that for myself now. I can be that for that teenage part of me. That way, next time it tries to stop me from moving forward, I know that that's just an old pattern, an old part of me that just needs to be loved on and appreciated for keeping me safe for so long. And now I can choose to take the wheel back over control and decide to make the choices that I know that are best suited for me. 36-year-old Jason. What are the new resilient behaviors going to be around this for myself? And for me, it's like, okay, I schedule my routine. It's like, okay, every Monday we go and we shoot the video. I have, a little template set up beforehand so I can just turn the camera on and rip. And then I have a little affirmation for myself where it's like, hey, I think of my past clients and how much they have benefited from hearing the things that I have to say. And I remind that part of myself, that younger part of myself, like, hey, just so you know, we're 36. We know a lot of good shit now. People want to hear from us. And that really helps that younger part of me relax. And it's like, what is the new story that I'm going to tell myself? It's like, hey, people actually want to hear from me. As a matter of fact, I got an awesome email this morning, just barely about to put out my 6th episode, and I already have 100 downloads. That's freaking amazing. Again, that's another disconfirming experience or proof to myself that, hey, people actually do want to hear from me. What are the new emotional states that I want to train? And what that would be is the acknowledgement of, me getting into yellow about the worry, and then being able to recognize that and get myself back into green before I start rocking into shooting my videos. It's like, what are the beliefs and the concepts about it? And what is, how do I want to remember that incident? Okay, so really, again, the beliefs and the concepts, they have a lot to do with the story. And the new belief is going to be like, hey, people do want to hear from me. And how I'm going to remember this feeling in the past is just like, hey, I was just a kid that didn't know better and was afraid to fail. But I know now that failure is necessary and is definitely a key ingredient with regards to success. So that has now allowed me to shift again. So instead of it being procrastination being a bad behavior, I can see now that my procrastination was just an adaptive response to help keep me safe from what other people might say or think, and other people's opinions having too much of a hold on me and having an effect on me, which makes sense if I'm operating from that younger version of myself. So I can start seeing these opportunities as growth potential for me being able to step into the person and the man that I'm supposed to be, and also proving to myself that I am 100% capable of doing this stuff and more, which starts to help rewire your brain. Again, you start to turn on that neuroplasticity so that you can start creating new pathways with regards to moving forward. And that can really be inserted into any behavior. Again, I use procrastination for myself for this one. But there's lots of different ways that you can apply this to your life. And this is probably one of my favorite things to do with clients because it's so eye-opening to see and watch them connect the dots on that. Which, by the way, if you're interested in one-on-one training, check out my website, jasonschnitzercoaching.com. You can apply there for a free discovery call, or shoot me a DM on Instagram and see if I have one-on-one availability still. Because this stuff is great. And once you get it, you can start doing it yourself, but it's so helpful to have somebody walk you through it the first time. But I'm really curious to hear from you guys to see if you were able to kind of like dissect this in your own life. Is it kind of weird to you that a younger part of you might be showing up and trying to protect you from certain things? I thought that was fascinating when I learned that. And also it's almost like I regained control over lots of different behaviors that I had that would show up in my relationships or, my workout routine, or in this case, my business. That was just super awesome to find out. So as always, guys, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or have any ideas for the show, always feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram, Jason Schnitzer Coaching. I'm always looking for more things to chat about. I usually bring up things that are pertinent to my life or that have come up in my client's life and that you guys might find helpful in moving forward and having you rise to be the best man that you can be. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.